If you're a fan of Jimmy Neutron's friendship with his best friend Carl Wheezer, you might be in for a surprise. The beloved animated series Jimmy Neutron, Boy Genius has been a much-loved staple in children's television, and most of the episodes focus on the camaraderie of the friends. Steel yourself though, because what you're about to be bombarded with will change the way you remember these tunes. As you know, the show follows the adventures of Jimmy and his group of friends as they navigate through their daily lives in the fictional town of Retroville. Jimmy's best friend Carl is an embodiment of a cliche geek with his soft heart and massive love of llamas. Throughout the show, Carl is obsessed with his bestie Jimmy a little more than the rest of the gang. Did you ever notice this? Well, some fans believe that this is because Jimmy Neutron isn't real, but instead a figment of Carl's imagination. This shocking theory has been speculated by fans time and time again, given the stark comparison between Carl's insecurities and Jimmy's outstanding qualities and how his world revolves around Jimmy. Without further ado though, let's dive into the details. The theory suggests that Carl, Jimmy's best friend, has created Jimmy as a way to cope with his own insecurities and to feel more important. Carl is a shy, timid, and often overlooked character in the show. He's not academically gifted like Jimmy, and he often feels overshadowed by his best friend's intelligence and accomplishments. We get a sense of Carl's insecurity in the episode Carl Wheezer, Boy Genius, where he creates a clone of himself in an attempt to become more like Jimmy. This shows how Carl sees himself in an alternate universe where he's the brilliant kid everyone adores. There are several nods to this theory throughout the series. For example, when Carl creates a clone of himself, the clone begins to develop a personality of its own and eventually turns against Carl. This could be a warning about the dangers of creating imaginary friends or alter egos. The theory goes on to suggest that Jimmy is actually a projection of Carl's idealized self. In his mind, Carl sees himself as smart, confident, and respected just like Jimmy. The show's creators have hinted at this possibility through various clues throughout the series. In the episode Party at Neutrons, when Jimmy's parents ask where Jimmy is, Carl responds by saying he's in his lab doing what he does best. This could be interpreted as Carl acknowledging that Jimmy is a creation of his own imagination and that he's the one in control of Jimmy's actions and abilities. Have you ever noticed how Jimmy creates most of his awesome inventions at school? Well, it's so much easier to daydream and concoct imaginary scenarios during classes, so school time really is the best time for Carl to imagine all these possibilities. Since Carl is socially anxious and finds it difficult to interact with people, most of his time is spent with his imaginary best friend. Remember how excited he gets for the summer camp for gifted children in the episode Carl Wheezer, Boy Genius? But he becomes increasingly anxious as it gets closer because the thought of making new friends and fitting in worries him. He also has a panic attack when he remembers that he forgot his inhaler back home because he's too ashamed to have an asthma attack in front of his new classmates. In another episode, Hall Monster, Carl hides in the locker as he's too nervous to go to the school dance. Carl is a sweet boy, but living up to his parents' expectations has really done a number on his mental health. Poor Carl is so insecure that even though his best friend is imaginary, he still has second thoughts about joining Jimmy's superhero team in the episode The League of Villains because of his cowardice. Just like that, despite his excitement to be invited to join Jimmy's superhero team in the episode called The Endmen, he's afraid to do so. The idea of performing heroic deeds in front of others cripples Carl with anxiety. In the episode Retroville 9, he's excited about joining the baseball team but becomes socially anxious about playing in front of the entire school. All of this can be interpreted as evidence backing the fan theory. Since Carl was simply unable to deal with life the way it was, he cooked up a fictional heroic personality that could conquer his world easily, one invention at a time. Now, you're all aware that friendship is one of the most beautiful relationships ever, but in this show, fans have often pointed out that Jimmy constantly risks a lot to be there for Carl. And go figure, since Jimmy is Carl's extended imagination, it's only befitting that he always springs to action to be there for his best buddy. Just think about it. In the episode The Empire Strikes Back, Jimmy is devastated when Carl goes missing and spends the entire episode trying to find him. In the episode Retroville 9, Jimmy is willing to risk the big baseball game to save Carl's life when he's hit by a dangerous pitch. And when Jimmy and all his friends are stranded in the past, Jimmy moves heaven and earth when he realizes that Carl has been left behind when the friends work together to fix the timeline. This can be taken as Carl's wistful desire to be seen as important in someone's eyes, be it imaginary or all in his head. Throughout the show, Jimmy always has Carl's back. He's the one who's shown to help Carl achieve his dream of becoming a scientist when they travel to the future. In the episode The Science Affair, Jimmy is quick to come to Carl's defense when he is wrongly accused of cheating to win. Jimmy goes to great lengths to protect Carl's secret identity as the llama in the Endmen and is determined to keep him safe from harm. In the Attack of the Twonkies, Jimmy risks his own safety to rescue Carl from a swarm of dangerous alien creatures. Whenever Carl is in danger, Jimmy is always the first one that comes looking for him and ultimately saves him, like when Carl gets stuck in the underground cave system in the episode The Evil Beneath. Jimmy always helps Carl try to overcome his insecurities and realize his own intelligence and worth. Now, we all get that friendship is all about sacrifice and love, but this is a little too much, don't you think? It all comes down to the fact that Jimmy is Carl's imaginary best friend who is always there to protect and guide him. Maybe this is Carl's defense mechanism for always being the odd one out in society. When Carl's mother needs help to save her job as a news anchor, guess who's the one to help Carl? Yep, it's the one and only Jimmy Neutron. Carl imagines scenarios like the episode Carl Squared, where Jimmy supposedly creates a clone of Carl, but ultimately realizes that he values the real Carl as a friend. All of this points to the emptiness that Carl feels. Maybe this is his coping mechanism to deal with life. Another piece of evidence that supports this theory is the fact that Jimmy is the only character in the show who seems to have an unlimited supply of advanced technology at his disposal. While it is true that Jimmy is portrayed as a child genius, some fans have pointed out that it's unlikely that a child would have access to such advanced technology without the help of adults. Maybe Carl is just using his imagination to create a world in which he and his friends have access to amazing technology that they would otherwise not have access to in real life. I mean, have you ever wondered how a 6th grader becomes genius enough to invent complex alternative energy sourcing machines, time-traveling devices, and life-changing technology on almost a daily basis, and why only Jimmy? The reason could very well be that this is all a part of Carl's imagination. In his mind, his perfect friend is capable of doing anything. There's really not much to argue here. Next, let's talk about Carl's obsession with his bestie. I mean, truthfully, who wouldn't be? Especially when they custom-made their best friend according to their wishes. Sometimes it feels like Carl is using Jimmy as a way to push himself out of his comfort zone. For instance, in the episode The Phantom of Retroland, Carl is scared of riding the roller coaster with Cindy and Sheen, but he does so in order to impress Jimmy. This means it's not all bad. Maybe Carl uses Jimmy as some type of accountability gauge, an ever-present friend for life. Some fans believe that the show leaves hints for the viewers to notice Carl's erratic dependence on Jimmy. For example, in Jimmy Goes to College, Carl is devastated when Jimmy decides to attend college in another town and goes to great lengths to convince him to stay. Maybe it's Carl's mind trying to jerk him back to reality, but he's not ready to face the world all alone without his imaginary best friend. Jimmy is his gateway to blending into the world. Carl is insecure about his own abilities and talents and sees Jimmy as a model of excellence that he wants to emulate. Carl is socially awkward and has trouble making friends, so he latches onto Jimmy as his only close companion. He sees Jimmy as a symbol of intelligence and success and wants to be associated with him in order to boost his own self-esteem. The fan theory takes this one step further to suggest that the other characters in the show are also figments of Carl's imagination. Each character represents a different aspect of Carl's personality or his idealized version of himself. Sheen is Carl's desire for adventure and excitement, and Cindy represents his romantic aspirations. Libby, who is Cindy's best friend, is, according to the theory, actually Carl's desire for acceptance and friendship. By creating these characters in his mind, Carl can explore different facets of his own personality and desires. These fan-fueled ideas suggest that Jimmy Neutron is not a real character, but instead is a figment of Carl's imagination. This theory has gained traction among fans and has sparked many discussions about the show's underlying themes and character developments. But what do you think? Make sure to let me know in the comments below.